what are some of the, when you think about your organization, what are some of the key people-related risks that you've identified that you're facing at the moment?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Generations of employees working in the organization. I mean, this is something that we see. I mean, in claims management, loss adjusting, we're really we're doing a lot of work around the war for talent piece in terms of what we're doing with our we really across the whole. So where we're focusing on early careers, we're looking also a lot on as a professional services organization, we're looking really at how do we transfer that expertise, that knowledge transferred down through the organization. And one thing that we've got is, fantastically diverse organization, and also in terms of how we are bringing that knowledge through the business. Mentioned the war for talent thing. That's a huge thing for adjusting. As I said, professional services organisations. It's massive. It's been on the horizon for a long time as well. We have started to see that starting to change a little bit as certainly in the UK, the labour market started to ease very slightly, but it is difficult in terms of the top ends of major and complex loss, where we have obviously Crawford embedded, and obviously in the UK we've just been hit with two storms, two weather-related surge events back to back. Many of my colleagues are out there, handling claims, for businesses right now. That's we need the people on the ground to do that, and that is really where the people risk comes from. Sarah, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Effion, what about you? You're bringing more of an HR perspective to this. What do you see as some of the risks that Crawford is perhaps facing, or that other organizations might be facing from a people perspective?
I think I'm probably just going to build a lot on what Luke and Matt have already shared. If we go back slightly, we did, of course, have the big resignation, right? Also referred to as the big quit or the great reshuffle, where employees across multiple sectors came to the realization that they weren't content, right, in their jobs during the pandemic. In 2021, actually, CIPD research found that 43% of people surveyed said that they were extremely likely to consider changing jobs in the next year. And key reasons for that were based on a number of factors: work-life balance, work environment, flexibility, and of course, the industry in which they're working. Crawford UK was ahead of the game, however, because we swiftly engaged with our employees and implemented a smarter working policy, which supported our employees. It improved employee engagement, morale, and productivity, allowed them to remain or have better work-life balance with reduced travel time and cost. We ensured that we remained an employer of choice with enhanced staff retention and wider recruitment opportunities. We enhanced, as Luke referenced, equality, diversity, and inclusion across the organization. And then we also modernized the business, creating opportunities for efficiency.
Lovely, thank you. Mike, coming to you, I know you've done a lot of research in this area, and obviously you've got a wide range of clients. What are some of the trends you're seeing in terms of risks that organizations are facing generally when it comes to people and talent?
Well, I think all of the other panelists have mentioned all relevant points regarding people risk, and it's quite interesting to hear how they resonate with what our view is of obviously how people risk and how important people risk is to organizations. I think just simply, okay, it's very evident here in the UK, but it's the same across other markets as well. Businesses these days are facing enormous challenges. They've got this whole balance around inflationary pressures. They've got labor market and materials also being in the sense of the supply chain being being really affected by crises that are happening globally. And at the same time, of course, organizations still need to deliver growth. They still need to be productive. They still need to be successful. And I think at the heart of it, we're saying that people is a key function of that effectively. And therefore, obviously, if you think about it, all organizations have people and there are risks associated to that. What we're seeing, though, I think, which is quite encouraging, and it's a narrative that we have been strongly pushing for the last 3 or 4 years, is for risk managers and for HR professionals to work closer together, because they complement each other. If we think of it from a cost perspective, we know that here in the UK and in other markets, the costs of employee benefits, and if we pick out one in particular, health insurance, that's rocketing, not least from the delayed impact from the pandemic, the access to care, the social economic challenges that are affecting businesses in the UK and the NHS. That's creating a bubble of potential demand and need for care. And unfortunately, the employer is more often than not the focal point, or becomes the replacement for access to treatment. Now, that has an impact on health insurance and health insurance care. And then if you think about it as a people risk element, how do you make sure your employees are productive and at work and continue to be contributing to their business? And if they're off sick, they can't do that. So mitigating that risk is important. But this is where, for example, HR and risk managers could work really well together, because risk managers and insurance managers are experts in placing risk, in managing insurance contracts, not taking anything away from the expertise of HR professionals, but they can work hand in hand together. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an insurance contract. There are different funding mechanisms as well. So we're seeing that trend where we're seeing that connection, and I think that's really, really good. It also, crosses over into the war for talent, which I know Fyung's also mentioned, because ultimately, again, linked to inflation, pay increases, pay demands are outstripping perhaps what businesses can offer. So the whole concept around, well, what is an employee value proposition? How do I make sure my employees feel that they're getting real value and being supported by their employer becomes even more important. And that helps mitigate risks as well. And I think Matt talked a little bit about conduct risk, mitigating that kind of scenario occurring. If your employees are engaged and they are at work and they're effective, well, then that's beneficial for businesses as well. So I think it crosses over a number of factors, but those are the two most that probably come to mind for me, Sarah.
Coming straight back to you, Mike, thinking about recruitment in particular, recruitment retention in particular, how is that landscape changing, and why is, we've had the big resignation, etc., mentioned already. Why is that such a challenge or a key risk for organizations at the moment?
Well, I just think we know at the moment that there is high demand. There is high demand for expertise in certain fields, and I think actually, if we think about it simply, and I'm reflecting on perhaps my naivety, but I was speaking to a client that was a national water board, and we were talking about essentially, what is their challenges around recruitment, and they're talking about they're having to compete with tech firms and other financial services firms. And lots of other different industries for data scientists, so in one microcosm of a particular role, lots and lots of industries are fighting for specific talent. So, ensuring that the employee value proposition is as strong as possible, that employers can attract, and not only, that kind of role, but all broader roles as well, and retain talent is incredibly important. So, yeah, but on the flip side, employers can't continue to just pay more salary. So there has to be a focus on providing a much more broader employee value proposition that covers all of those aspects.
That makes sense. Fyung, you kind of touched on this, but what are some of the things that you guys are doing to overcome some of this kind of talent risk? So what are the talent risks you're facing, and how are you thinking about tackling those a little bit? What are some of those? How do you see the recruitment landscape is changing, and thinking about it with your kind of risk hat on?
It's a really interesting question. Mike, you talked about the EVP, and in terms of why it was actually the War for Talent paper in the 1990s, which talked about why would smart, energetic, ambitious people actually want to come and work for your organization. So the key thing is really where we're looking at our EVP around the early careers piece, particularly. We're doing a lot of work with our leaders as well across the business, in terms of actually understanding how those people are, how those leaders are equipped to manage that risk moving into the future. Pick that back up on it. As I say, I mean, the EVP thing is really interesting, and where we are talking to people who want to come and work for Crawford's, it's actually not always about, it's not always about salary. You know, culture of the business is really important as well. That's certainly one of the reasons that I joined Crawford, and you know, opportunities to get involved in purpose-led work. You know, we're really fortunate working in the claims industry that, you know, we are here to help people recover from insured losses. You know, when we do have weather-related surge events like we've got at the moment, actually going out helping people put the businesses and lives back together. That's a really undervalued part of our value proposition.
Thank you so much. It's amazing to me how similar the themes are and the risks that we're talking about are. With respect to Crawford, we're facing what I'm sure a lot of industries are. We call it the silver tsunami in the United States, where we have a generation that's a large part of our workforce and talent. They're not just retiring, but they're retiring earlier because COVID has changed priorities and focus on work-life balance. But as Luke and Mike referenced, it's sharing that broad EVP or employee value proposition and showing how robust and purposeful our company is. That's really been monumental for us. Compensation is beyond compensation, right? It's benefits, it's support resources, it's special programs, and our culture, as Luke mentioned. What really resonates with our employees, our recruits, our EVP strategy is our mission, which is to restore lives, businesses, and communities. And we've identified that people are really looking for a purpose. They're really looking for a connection to be able to make an impact in the world. And so with our mission, as I said, restoring lives, businesses, and communities, each role at Crawford is committed to that, and we share that on a daily basis. Now, pre-pandemic, the approach to recruitment was really rigid. We know that it was Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And we used to advertise in specific geographic areas with quite rigid terms and conditions. And this generally produced a really small talent pool within our industry, and we often exhausted those local pools. But we were able to change to hybrid, making smarter and more flexible working decisions, and really improved employee engagement. It not only significantly widened our talent pool, but it allowed us to recruit on a more nationwide basis for the pool of talent for the majority of our vacancies. And we also made sure that we're using technology and social media tools and platforms. Gone are the days of the newspapers, gone are the days of the flyers, and really word of mouth. It's really about social media and technology, making sure that we're connecting with people. We also enabled having a more inclusive approach with our enhanced benefits, as I mentioned, a more modern approach. And it's really been important to be considerate to the concerns and issues created by cost of living crisis. Our employees have access to financial well-being support tools, and we've adopted our Crawford Benefits platform to highlight where savings can be made, such as supermarket savings and other discounts. And this has really been greatly appreciated and received by our employees. And our focus, as mentioned earlier, is really on early careers. And we're also looking to introduce initiatives to support women returners who have been out of work for some time. We have early careers programs, Luke may touch on that, apprentices and Crawford Academy. And we can also talk about, we have our formal intern program that we're excited about implementing in 2024 with our DEI Council. So that while there are a number of risks, there are lots of opportunities for us to supersede those risks and really improve the employee's experience.
Thank you. Sorry. Just a reminder before I go into my next question, we are taking questions from the audience. So if anybody has questions that they'd like me to ask to our panelists, if you put them into the Q&A, I will come to them and I will ask them to people. So get thinking, post them throughout, and I'll come to them shortly. Luke, why, obviously this is a problem, but I just want to contextualize it. And what are the consequences? Why is this a risk management problem? What are the consequences for ignoring talent risk or people related risk? What's the upshot? Why do we care about this, I guess?
Yeah, that's putting it into the sort of real world context. I mean, look, we really need to think about the last couple of years in terms of, again, I come at this from the sort of claims management perspective, which is where I'm sort of heavily engaged. But with Crawford, I mean, we only need to look at the aftermath of COVID BI right? So business interruption losses following the first couple of waves of COVID, had a massive effect on businesses. You know, really an existential threat, and some of that you know, some of that we've seen aftershocks, you know, particularly sort of recent court cases that are still rumbling through the court system. The key thing really, and again, coming back to clients where we're, you know, again, we're talking a lot to our clients, is that they're actually asking us, you know, what you know, what's Crawford doing in this space at the moment? I feel sort of reference Crawford Academy training as well as something that Matt was talking about. And again, coming back to sort of like our earlier piece, and linking it really to the consequence piece, the consequence thing. If we're not adapting how we're actually, you know, if we're not adapting how we are approaching early careers, for example, and people actually coming into the organization, you know, if we're not talking about purpose-led work and culture and things like that, then, you know, we're going to end up with a scenario where we cannot fill those roles which we've got in the organization. And as I said, where we are in a in quite a sort of an interesting time at the moment, and referencing back to the sort of war on talent piece, clients are looking again for Crawford to demonstrate some leadership, explain what our strategy is around our people, because again, coming back to claims, you know, it's heavily people focused activity. We haven't yet got to the stage where someone's written a AI program with ChatGPT, which can actually manage these high volume, low value claims as yet. So it is all about the people. So it's an interesting one, and that's before we even start talking about sort of you know, catastrophe, climate change risks, again, which require specific expertise, and that's not just in insured losses as well. We're also involved in sort of loss recovery in the UK market as well, and claims advocacy as well. So it's a really interesting piece, but you know, it's just unpacking all those consequences really. If there's not a coherent, joined up approach to managing the risks.
Makes perfect sense. Mike, what about from your perspective, what has your research kind of shown are the long-term consequences of people ignoring their talent or people risks? What are the big upshots of it, and why should risk care about it, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it for us, it feels as though if there's to do nothing is almost the biggest risk of all, actually. So organizations should really be thinking about how they mitigate what is effectively, you know, a number of people risks and how that can impact on their business. I think most importantly, failure to collaborate and work together between HR and risk managers and addressing a people risk as a key thing means that there's potentially clients that's missing out on the opportunity to manage those risks better. It could be as simple as, you know, as I've indicated before, there could be ways in which you could place insurance in a smarter way, a different funding model, a different way of being able to manage those costs and risks. Right through to actually getting much deeper into, well, okay, what are those risks for an organization? And in fact, from a talent perspective, what is the outcome? What is the potential outcome for our business if we don't ensure that we get the right talent strategy, right, you know, in place, and the right employee value proposition? So I think for me, organizations have got to think about that not just the short-term outcome, but also the long-term outcome for their business as well by not addressing these issues.
That makes sense. Afin, do you have anything to add on the kind of the consequences of perhaps ignoring some of these risks?
Certainly. With respect to the biggest risk, I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We need people, right? If we don't have people, we can't meet the needs of our customers. Now, technology and AI are part of our reality to succeed and meet the needs of our customers. But when all is said and done, we need people. And if we do not address people-related risks, we will lose talent, we'll reduce the strength of our EVP and our reputation in the market. Also, something to consider, our war on talent has changed our shift in focus in some respects in our hiring strategy. We used to just hire people with experience and expertise. Now we're shifting to hiring people with transferable skills like customer service and integrity. accountability, desire to learn, because we've learned that we can train you and give you the experience through programs such as Crawford Academy and Early Career Program. One thing I want to touch on, as Matt alluded to, is we should really be concerned about succession planning. It is not just about knowledge retention, it's about knowledge transfer and knowledge sharing. And we should also be sure that we're cross-training, because if one person does everything and they leave, it creates a huge gap in the organization. So I do believe some of the risks that we might also face are succession planning. That's some of the things that people should be focused on. At Crawford, of course, we are focused on that inclusive culture and environment, and we are focused on making Crawford a great place to work where the people first culture is paramount.
Lovely. Matt, coming to you now. Anything to add in that in terms of the consequences, why this is a risk issue?
No, so I think probably the only other one I would add is then just really about the culture of the firm and making sure that that we're operating and holding up the values that we believe in. And I think for what I've seen within Handelsbanken, the culture is something that is passed on through word of mouth. It's shown through the demonstrating through the observed behaviours of the senior management and the operating, the teams operating. So I think without that culture, the firm starts to sort of deteriorate, and it would lead eventually to a point where you're not delivering good outcomes for your customers. So I think that for me is kind of key to making sure that we're thinking about it. And as Affion picked on, diversity and inclusion, if we're not focused on managing our people risks, then things like diversity and inclusion will start to fall away very rapidly and leave us in a worse position.
Lovely. I'm going to pivot to, we've had quite a few audience questions in already, so I'm going to pivot to one right now. So I'll read it out and then I'll work out. If somebody particularly wants to jump in, just stick your hand up and we'll go straight to you. But if not, I'll pick on somebody. So the question is, the first question is, how does AI affect recruitment? And I know this is something you kind of touched on, Affion, but can automatic CV readers work in detriment of company recruitment? Recently worked on manually checking CVs discarded by one of these systems and realized that 80% of those CVs were incorrectly discarded, adding to the risk of missing out on amazing talent. So I guess it's, what is the role of, can AI help with this massive recruitment and talent challenge, but also are there risks in using it? Who would like to have a go?
I'll jump in there, actually, if that's okay.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting. I'm a big proponent of AI. I think that's got a huge amount to offer in terms of the day-to-day and cutting down a lot of the tasks that we have to deal with, right? But where it's incorrectly deployed or where the solution is not actually working for the organization, right? So maybe maybe recruiters need to, or maybe organizations need to look at actually how the process around submitting a CV is that still really fit for purpose in 2023. A lot of the time we look at talent internally and externally in the market, and a lot of those conversations are actually driven by network, right? And having that conversation has been really good to see. A lot of work with some DE&I groups, and really focusing on those early careers colleagues in the market who've actually come in, maybe come into the workforce during COVID, don't know how to network, haven't built up a professional network, and actually spending time. Empower Development is one in the UK, really good at doing that sort of stuff. So, coming back to my point, really, it's a question really whether that recruitment process is fit for purpose in 2023. We spend a lot of time, as I said, talking to people in the market who've expressed an interest in coming to work for us in whatever capacity. And one of the big things that we are able to leverage as a large organization is you come into Crawford for a job, you stay for a career, right? So you can move within the organization, and we're doing huge amount of work around internal mobility, and we're really looking to have our sort of internal recruitment strategy around how we'd much rather bring someone through the organization internally than look externally to the market, because you've got all those added benefits around understand the culture, the processes, and the way of doing things internally, rather than when you have to bring someone in and it might be 4, 5, 6 months before they're up and running properly. So yeah, I'm as I said earlier, I'm a big advocate for AI where it's properly embedded, but it's a problem yet to be solved, I think, really.
Anybody else with
I
anything?
agree. I was just going to suggest that technology is not infallible, right? And there will always be problems with technology. However, it's in our best interest to leverage technology and AI to assist us with the volume of data that we are tasked with on a daily basis, especially in the recruitment space. I remember as a recruiter many years ago, I had to manually sort resumes into folders. And now having AI is absolutely transformational. Is it perfect? No, but organizations can improve their recruitment strategy by doing random audits to determine how AI is functioning. Is it looking for the proper keywords? And also from a recruitment strategy, if you're not seeing the number of candidates or the caliber of candidates, that's a suggestion that maybe we should look at who we screened out. Are the AI tools working properly? So AI is not infallible, as I mentioned. However, it is definitely an improvement in terms of how we review submissions from a recruiting perspective. And as Luke mentioned, it's really about how do we promote from within. That also matches our employee retention, right? If we can help people progress and develop within the company, it's not just a job, it's a career, as Luke mentioned. We're already winning in terms of our war on talent and employee retention.
Right. Another question from the audience, and I think I might pick on Matt first for this one, but then the rest of you might want to jump in. Matt, in your experience, is there any leadership style that leads to greater retention? Or anything else that you think, I guess, that the senior leadership of an organization can be doing to themselves to improve this area?
I think for me, the sort of the rise of the sort of the inclusive leader has probably been the area I've seen where has the biggest impact. I think leadership styles change and adapt to the situation or the organization that you're working in. And I have seen very successful leaders deploy a number of different leadership styles. But I think that as I look at the workforce that I'm now recruiting, that the focus from them is on making sure that we are thinking carefully about their needs. There's a lot more focus on the employee and their needs. So I think that sort of that inclusive leadership would probably be the area I would see as being more important going forwards.
Anybody else got anything they'd like to jump in on successful leadership styles for recruitment?
It's an interesting one because, you know, certainly when I was, how I was managed in my 20s is not, you know, which is not that long ago. That's not, you know, it's a different leadership style, right? Okay, so again, we're coming back to sort of like those people coming into the organization. Now, you can't manage them how you were managed, right? You know, 15, 20 years ago. It's a different proposition. There is a different set of expectations. And I mentioned what we're doing with our leaders, with our managers in the organization already, but some really interesting conversations around, you know, having those discussions with our colleagues. You know, how can we get the best out of you, right? Because our talent come in the organization. By the time you arrive at Crawford, you know, we've invested a huge amount already in the recruitment process, and also particularly front loading a lot of that investment in the first few months really does pay a huge amount of dividends. You know, moving forward. And I think we're starting to get the balance right in terms of how we are managing those conversations. You set someone up early, you know, for success in the organization, and really just you can unlock a huge amount of potential. And you know, that, you know, working with you're really fortunate to be working with some colleagues internally where I've really just been able to support the managers in investing that time and you know, absolutely fly. You you know, absolutely flying in terms of their career with Crawford. And as I said, that's really for us what it's all about, and that's where we are investing in people.
The only thing I would add just is, because I think everybody's, both Luke and Matt have mentioned things that I think are absolutely correct. The only other thing I would observe is, well, I think is, and it's used, it's a word that's used before, but authenticity. So as a leader, you know, if you're an employee and you're looking at your leader and leading the business and they're really authentic in the truest sense, I think there's greater connectivity and a greater sense of, actually, look, we've got purpose, we know where we're going, you know, and in it together in a sense. So coming back to that inclusivity piece from Matt. So that's the only thing I'd add, really.
There's another question here. Well, there's two questions that I'm going to sort of group together, and I'm going to warn you now, Mike, that I'm coming to you first, and then we'll see who else wants to tackle them. But I feel like you'll have views on this. So it's kind of around sickness and health. So the first one is about burnout. So does the panel have any thoughts on effective strategies for managing employee expectations as to how long a day is and how to stem the impact of burnout? And the second one is more broad around sickness, but to what extent is sickness absence an issue for the panel following COVID? And is there a culture change in how staff view sickness absence? So on the one hand, are we still forcing people to go into work when they're not well? And on the other hand, how are we making sure that people don't, you know, experience stress and burnout?
Yeah, that's two big, wide questions really there, aren't they?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So I think it is interesting. I mean, and really just quoting, I think, from the latest of ONS, Office of National Statistics report on sickness absence. You know, we know in the UK that the latest report for 2022 shows that sickness absence rates are at the highest it's been for the last 20 years. In the first normal year, or considered normal year post-pandemic. So there's no doubt about it. I think, you know, the effects of the pandemic and a number of other factors all has played a part in creating, I think, this real bubble and challenge around sickness absence. But I think what it does mean is that for organizations, they have to think about, well, not only have we got, do we have a benefits program in place that is, you know, aligned to our values, aligned to our employee value proposition, but also, is it effective? You know, and I think sometimes they're striking the balance between making sure that you're winning the war for talent by having a benefits program that attracts all the generations, but it is also, you know, at the upper quartile of your market to attract talent is absolutely right, because you want to win the war for talent and retain talent. But also you have to do the analysis of, is it delivering what it's designed to do? And I think focusing on areas such as mental health, such as easier access to care through telemedicine, which is becoming more and more prominent, ensuring that you've got the right processes in place to ensure that people are supported when they need care, is incredibly important. So I would say, you know, in terms of sickness absence, yes, when we talk to clients, we're having that conversation, but we're always going towards, have you designed your benefits in the most effective way possible? And are they actually delivering all of what you expect them to be? So I think that's a key part of it. In terms of the other question around expectations for employees, I think that's really difficult, because I think that's down to each individual business and how they sort of position that with their employees. And if I think about Mercer Marsh Benefits, particularly our organization, you know, we have been very clear in encouraging people back to work in the sense of, actually, look, think about what you're doing in terms of value for clients and how you get you know, value in collaborating with colleagues. But it's not been about forcing people back to work and having 5 days in the office or having to work long days. We are quite conscious about ensuring that our employees see the value of working from home or working from the office, but also the value that they deliver to their clients. And of course, we're very alive to the fact that obviously we want to make sure that we walk the walk as much as we talk the talk. So other than that, really, I don't think I have a strong opinion on either side of it. Perhaps, you know, perhaps one of the other panel would be better placed to answer that question.
If I hear correctly, the question is about burnout and how do we address burnout?
Yeah,
what are the risks implied?
Yeah, so a big part of the question was exactly that, you know, so it started with how long a day is, and I guess that's playing into that kind of flexibility around how and when and where you work, etc. But then particularly how to stem the impact of burnout, which I know there's a lot of research that shows that burnout is a really escalating and quite problematic issue.
Right. So I would suggest that there's no one size fits all answer, as Mike alluded to. But generally, I would share that, especially post-COVID, we are changing how we're thinking. We now have hybrid work schedules where we're not requiring people to be in the office all the time. We have flex work schedules where maybe you work the beginning part of the day, you have off during the middle part of the day to care for some things, and then you come back the end of the day. But COVID has really just transformed everything in terms of what we do, right? It transforms how we get medical care. As Mike mentioned, now we have telemedicine. We have the schedule changes that I talked about. We also should be, as organizations, reviewing our benefits designs annually to be sure that it's meeting the needs of our employees, to see if there are additional resources and opportunities. And with COVID, we've all shifted towards mental health, right? There's a huge focus on mental health right now in terms of employee burnout and work-life balance. So it's really about organizations providing resources, whether it's Headspace or other mental health resources. And then from an organizational perspective, how do we help with staffing? With COVID, now we're all working lean and mean. And I used to tell people, you know, it used to be slim, lean and mean, but now the ribs are showing, right? So organizations really, we need to be able to right size our workforce and right size the workload balance so that our employees are not overwhelmed, so they're not having this work-life balance issue, because our employees want to work. They want to get the job done, but they can only do so much. So it's really, how do we minimize them being overwhelmed and provide as many resources as possible? Hoping that answered the question.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, I'm going to flip back to one of my questions, and I want to look at specifically examples of things that your organizations have done to manage talent risks. And we've got about 15 minutes left, so I'd say if we can focus in on one specific thing and perhaps give a little bit of detail around that and how it's helped. And I'm going to come to Matt first, I think, because I am.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So probably a couple of things and similar things have been mentioned as we've talked this morning. So one really big focus for us has been on looking through our employee value proposition and telling our staff about it and being very proud to tell people about it. And what we found is that by bringing that to life and being able to talk about it more actively, we found uptake in a number of the sort of the things that were being offered increased tenfold. It was great to see. And people were then proud to share those stories. So we also got a secondary benefit, which was our colleagues were then talking to their friends and saying, well, why don't you come and work for us? Because we offer this great package of things. And that improved, particularly in our operational areas, a number of things. I think Affion mentioned earlier the returners program that Crawford were offering. We're doing something very similar. We're looking at ways in which we can help particularly women who've been in the financial services industry and have had a break for a reason, return to banking and come and work with us in Handelsbanken. We had a fantastic uptake in terms of number of applicants. We've taken about 10 of those on for the first time this September, and we're looking to repeat that for future years, because it's really adding value into our organisation, and you get individuals that are up and running and able to contribute really quickly.
Lovely, thank you. Affion, let's come to you next. Affion.
Thank you. Certainly, there's a number of things that we've been doing to manage talent risks. We're offering more robust training and development programs. We have recognition programs where we appreciate people. We want to be sure that we recognize people for their achievements. Our retention programs, we're investing in our employees. We work really hard to promote from within. Most recently, our internal mobility is at its highest at 42%. It's 42%. Developing and progressing our internal talent is a key priority. And those are just a few things to touch on. And I believe Luke can also talk about our early career program, our training program, things of that nature. But it's really, how do we not only attract talent, but what do we have in place to retain our talent? And we're totally focused on that in Crawford.
Luke, do you want to jump in there and talk about some of those other things?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So yeah, thanks for setting that up, Obi. sort of referenced Crawford Academy previously, which is one of the sort of strategies we've got in terms of you know, really putting people right at the forefront of what we're doing, right? Because we're a people business. So I mean that really sort of boils down into you know, 3 core activities, which is you know, professional development, right? Professional qualifications. Crawford's got, you know, by far and away, you know, market leading reward structure in terms of professional qualifications. We've got a focus on the technical development as well, and we've got a huge amount of work which has been going on in the last 12 months around how we're building out our training proposition, right? So we're putting that in front of colleagues, really understanding where the gaps are in terms of their own, you know, they're helping us understand where the gaps are in terms of their own technical knowledge. And I'm a huge advocate again for sort of coaching and mentoring, and we're seeing because we're getting closer to our colleagues and actually understanding what their career goals are, helping them achieve those. We're actually bringing you know, returners, people who've left the business and come back, maybe during the Great Resignation, the Silver Tsunami, right? Love that. You know, people coming back into the organization because they actually feel they've got more to offer, right? And it's again really coming back to sort of almost coming back full circle where we first started talking. You know, we've got the 4 generations of employees in the organization, and it's just bringing that knowledge transfer, that institutional knowledge sort of down the organization. So it's all it's all about that, and you know, massive transformation in terms of how we've been doing things, you know, post-COVID. I mean, it's accelerated change, which is already in the works, but really where we're seeing the benefits of that is yeah, of course we did see the Great Resignation that causes a lot of issues, but where we're sort of moving more towards post-COVID environment, we're starting to see some of those issues really pull through, right? And as I said, people coming back to the organization. So yeah, so we're trying to bundle a lot of these solutions together and really sort of come up with a way of approaching. You know, again, it's not one size fits all. You can talk to one colleague in one part of the business and they've got different drivers, different motivations for someone who you think would be in the same boat, but it's really trying to drive that sort of bottom up understanding of what's driving those colleagues, right? What do they need? How can a business like Crawford, like massive organization like Crawford, actually support that, right? And we obviously talk a lot about sort of what can we offer as an organization in exchange for someone coming to work here, right? And organizations are getting a lot smarter in terms of that, and there is a lot of competition. You know, insurance is wrongly, for my view, seen as lacking in innovation, where you compare it to something like, you know, tech or fintech potentially, but we're doing a lot to change that.
Great, thank you, Mike.
I guess probably the only thing I would add, I mean, and it's clear that both Crawford and Handelsbanken are forward-looking organisations, but I would say the only other thing I would recommend is, and from an employee benefits lens perspective, is to ensure that however you create your benefits program or benefits design, that you have an eye on the future. So you can't future-proof forever, but you can future-proof for what's coming down the line. And so we know by 2025, 27% of the employee workforce will be Gen Z. And some of the research that we've already undertaken, trying to establish and understand, you know, that contract on that sense of contract of employment between employees of Gen Z and employers, and also what their needs and demands might be is quite interesting, because it is subtly different to perhaps other generations in the workforce. So this kind of comes back full circle to some of the comments made by other members of the panel, where we think about ESG, where we think about diversity, where we think about the value of working for an employer. So the broad brushstrokes there, but the only thing I would say, as I said, is just to ensure that you're also thinking about your future workforce coming through, as well as obviously what you currently have at the moment.
Great. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left. There are quite a lot of there are a couple more questions that I really wanted to ask, but I don't think we've got time to address them properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them to our panelists on email after this, and hopefully they'll give me some nice responses, and then I'll put them up in an article so that we can get answers to the ones that we can't get to. But what I'm going to do now with the last 5 minutes is ask everybody to perhaps reflect on one thing that you think that people in the audience might be able to go away and do if they're worried about their people risk, if they're worried about recruitment and retention. What are their next steps? You know, what can people who've listened to this webinar go away and do next? How should they progress from here? And I'm going to start with Luke, I think. Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's a great question. I think, look, in terms of putting some of what we've talked about into action, I think the one thing I'd come back to really is there's no magic bullet, right? There's no one size fits all. There's no single solution. If there was, I'm sure somebody would have invented it by now in terms of managing that people risk. Look, I think that the main thing is to try and understand really what the specific drivers for that organization are. Again, looking forward to the future. You know, how, you know, the people coming into the organization now, that, you know, driven by YouTube and TikTok and, you know, that sort of thing. That's the environment that the Generation Z and those coming after have been brought up in, right? So I think it's a case of trying to get to the nub really of what will drive engagement, okay, and then putting together, you know, a few different programs to actually drive that, and obviously matching where you see the future skills of the organization, right? But there's definitely no one size fits all. There's no one single solution. It's all about bundling together what will make sense, you know, for the future strategy of the organization.
Mike, what's the one thing that you want people to go away and do next?
Don't do nothing. Okay. I guess I'll follow that quickly by saying, and it seems simplistic, but, you know, risk managers and HR need to work together, and we're seeing that the most successful organizations that we're working with, that partnership between risk management and HR is really strong, because it delivers value both ways. So, you know, off the back of that, of course, there's benefit design, there's placement, there's insurance, there's loads of other things where you can complement each other. But one thing is, get talking and you know, deliver value for the organization and for your people by working collaboratively together.
Effian.
I can't limit it to one, as everyone shared. I'll limit it to two, which is, in my virtual background, Crawford, we're focused on technology and people. First, for technology, I would say maximize your current technology by making jobs easier for your employees, by leveraging technology to recruit talent. And then from a people perspective, look at your EVP, your culture, your purpose, your current employee resources, your benefits programs, your employee groups, your DEI initiatives. Look at those and see, are they really meeting your needs? Are they being communicated? Are they shared with your employees? Are they understood by your employees? Are they embodied? Are there opportunities for improvement? So I would submit, check yourself, check where you are, and then tweak as possible for the future. And don't rely on how we've always done it this way. Remember that you have to change, not just for the sake of change, but also with the times and for the future.
Brilliant, thank you. Matt, you're in last place, which means you have to come up with something deeply profound to guide our audience home.
Yeah, so rather than repeat everybody else, I think the one thing that I personally think is really strong is actually talking to your people and actually getting out and seeing what it's like in real life. We often think about the MI, we often look at the data points to try and tell us what's going on. But in my experience, spending time with your teams, they have the solutions, they have the answers. They're talking to their colleagues and peers in other firms who are doing things differently. So tap into that resource pool and spend time really understanding and getting to know what your people want will really help you to guide what you can be focusing on.
Lovely, thank you. I think that was a great way a great note to leave things on. I just want to take a very, very quick chance to thank all of our panelists. So we've got Luke Brannigan, People Development Director, Major and Complex Loss at Crawford. We've got Mike Knowles, Sales and Growth Leader at Mercer Marsh Benefits. We've had Matt Hanley, Chief Risk Officer at Handelsbanken. And we've had Effion Ekon, Crawford's Director of Human Resources. You've all been brilliant. You've all shared some fantastic tips. I also want to really thank our audience, because these sessions are so good when people ask loads of questions. It makes it really engaging, and it makes it a much, much more interesting discussion. And there will be a write-up of this webinar on the Strategic Risk website and also in our next issue of the magazine, so you'll be able to reflect on this. I will, as I said, put the questions we didn't get to answer to our panels, and we will write something up around that too. And for now, that's it, I think. Thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye.